This Saturday, the San Diego Growlers have unfinished business with the Atlanta Hustle. Back in week 3, Atlanta traveled west and narrowly escaped San Diego with a wild 1-goal win at the buzzer. And now the Growlers are determined to return the favor on the Hustle's home turf. It's the UFA Game of the Week, featuring the San Diego Growlers and the undefeated Atlanta Hustle. Opening poll set for Saturday at 7:30 Eastern and broadcast exclusively on WatchUFA.tv.
Welcome back. It's a rapid reaction episode of Swing Pass. We had an absolutely freaky Friday across the league last night, Friday, May 23rd, 2025. I am Adam Ruffner, and I am joined, as always, by Evan Lepler, my co-host here on the pod. We had 4 games, all of them with 1-goal conclusions, a double overtime finish in Carolina, a thriller that you called out in Utah, as well as a New York and Philly down to the wire finish once again between those two East Division rivals. Evan, we keep just hyping up the season, and I feel like every week that goes by, it sort of exceeds what we're even adorning superlatives on. You know, like it just, I cannot believe how many twists and turns there are to this league right now. You got the Growlers winning last night in double overtime, 26-25 in Carolina. They're now 4-1, traveling to face Atlanta in the game of the week tonight. Carolina 0-4. New York finally ending Philly's upstart undefeated season. Salt Lake clawing back from a 6-goal deficit at home against the Seattle team that's now also reeling. It's just the sort of favorites that we entered the season are at the bottom of half of these divisions. What are you seeing across the association right now as we continue into week 5?
Yeah, I think we've said it before. Things are upside down in a lot of ways. Like, over the past decade, there has never been a year where we've had 4 new teams make championship weekend compared to the year before. And while there's still a long way to go, you know, the 4 championship weekend teams from last year are, I think, 4-11 right now in their first 15 games, with Carolina being 0-4 and Seattle being 1-4. And, DC and Minnesota, I'm certainly not counting them out. And, am I ready to count out Carolina? No, but we're getting really close. Like, that was a tough loss last night. San Diego played great. The Growlers earned it. You know, the other story of the night last night, Adam, was controversial / really close calls at the end in key moments in all of the games. Foul called on Jacob Fairfax in double OT when it looked like he got the layout block on the under. Foul called. You know, the Philly-New York game looked like Scott Heyman might have had the block. Brian Jones and I were arguing about it in the booth. I thought it was a defensible foul call. Brian thought it was ridiculous and it should not have been a foul. And then the Asher Lance play late in the Salt Lake game, when that would have given Seattle a chance to tie again. So, like, we can dive into the nitty-gritty of all those calls. Just what I was thinking about as you were characterizing the Friday night, like, a question that I often get asked by people around the world: what is my favorite sport to broadcast? And it's a really hard question because I love doing a lot of different sports. And I often say, like, well, there's nothing like sitting courtside at an ACC basketball game in a sellout arena. I love calling the biggest games in Ultimate Frisbee. College football games, though, just have a monstrosity to them because they're 3.5, 4 hours long. You spend so many hours preparing. You spend a half an hour with the head coach and 20 minutes with both coordinators. And if you get a good game, if you're going into the fourth quarter and, like, everything has built up to the next, 20 to 30 plays over this 15-minute segment with 50 to 75,000 people in the stands, there's just a magnitude and grandiosity of that, like, feels so special to be a part of as a broadcaster. And I say that as a preface to the games that we're watching right now in the UFA, like New York, Philly, Carolina, San Diego. in Seattle, Salt Lake. And look, I didn't get to watch the Vegas Oregon game. That looked like an exciting, albeit turnover filled game too. There's so many things happening in each of these games. Like, you and I could spend 10 minutes talking about each point and we'd be here for weeks. Like, but it would be interesting and compelling, and the different things that we're seeing and the turning points and the swings of momentum and the highlights and the drops and the
No,
emotion. Like, it's so, there's so much going on that, like, when you get to the end of a close game, like we saw so many times last night, it just feels really special to be a part of it.
I think it's a terrific point that you make. And I think kind of going back just a half step to what you were bringing up with the contentious sort of calls at the end of these games, we could hem and haw back and forth about what we thought about each of those scenarios in those given games and whether it was the right call or not. I think to me what it speaks is the tension, the atmosphere that you're getting at, that these games are no longer what they were, half decade ago, which was kind of two chalk getting decided by a handful of goals. It's coming down to not only individual scores, but individual moments. It comes down to a whistle, a broken mark here, a mistake drop there. Like there aren't the margins that we're sort of used to seeing, the sort of almost exhibition style play that we're used to seeing in the regular season. We're in week 5, and that was just a slate of playoff games that we witnessed last night, right? There's chippiness.
It really was.
There's talk back. I just, like, that's where my mind goes. And I think you make an absolutely great point about, again, that sort of atmosphere. Like last night, maybe we should start with the Friday night Frisbee special out in Salt Lake. Seattle takes this absolutely commanding lead early, right? It's 8-4 after one. They were up 12-6 at one point midway through the second quarter. They had won the last time they had come into Zion Bank Stadium. They were feeling themselves, the Cascades were. And the shred through, I think, battening down a little bit on offense and really feeding on the energy of that stadium defensively and allowing the sort of atmosphere to take hold of the momentum, rallied back and had this incredible come from behind victory in front of their home fans. And I can't help but think that doesn't happen in other atmospheres of Ultimate Frisbee, right? That home crowd effect that the shred rode last night. I mean, they surfed that thing in the second half. You could just see it on the field at a certain point. This Cascades offense that was firing all cylinders the first 2 quarters. Christian Foster's just on fire, launching deep balls. Zeppelin Ronings tearing into deep space. It just goes away. And suddenly the crowd roars and roars more and more as the mistakes pile up for Seattle. And Salt Lake's just cashing in on these kind of almost silly transition scores with the sort of high energy bodies tumbling actions that were taking place. I mean, I just, to sort of try to dovetail off your point, I can't believe how much emotionality and discipline these games come down to, right? The sort of like true hallmarks of pro sports. Like, how do you harness yourself in these environments, in these moments? And I think we just saw a slate of games last night where that was the case again and again, especially in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter of these one-score affairs.
Yeah, and for a team like Seattle, that's their third one-goal loss of the season as they drop to 1-4, coming off a championship weekend berth. And, my friend and broadcasting colleague Brian Jones, as we're walking out of the stadium, said, quote, "I don't think I've ever seen a team more devastated looking after a regular season game than Seattle at the end there." And, like, he was right. The body language of the Cascades on the sideline, they were totally stunned. And I'm curious to, like, I mean, I was there, obviously, and I watched it all. And I still don't really know exactly how the momentum turned the way it did. Like, obviously, the crowd that you mentioned, they surfed it, or perhaps they shredded the wave of the crowd. The move, and, like, there's so many little things we could point to. The stat of the night for me that says a lot about the shred organization. I said this on the air, maybe in the pregame show, maybe during the broadcast, but 9 of their 20 players on their active 20 last night had not played more than 2 career UFA games which is to say they were rookies, and one was playing his first game, a handful were playing their second game, a handful were playing their third game. But like this was not the A team version of the Shred with no Will Selfridge and no Luke Jorgensen and no Ben Ashton, and they're still missing the Hoffman brothers who are injured, and guys were away playing and coaching college nationals, and they're dealing with injuries, and it felt early on like it was just going to be one of those nights, and it was going to be one of those circumstance games for the Shred. Like Seattle was playing inspired, as you said. Christian Foster was locked in, and I think I started to say on the air before getting interrupted by a Langley Fitzpatrick D. What about this kid, by the way? Like 20 years old, 6 blocks in his first 2 UFA games.
He's electric. Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't feel like Bryce Merrill had that many options, because his O-line was struggling and his D-line was struggling. So it was what was he going to do? It didn't feel like there were that many buttons to push, but the move to put Forsberg at 6'4" on Foster, it didn't stop Christian Foster. And I didn't get a chance to chat with Bryce after the game because I had to get Brian to the airport because he was taking a red eye home, and I'm on my way to college nationals as I speak. But yeah, watching the broadcast, I mean, the buzzer beater at the end of the second quarter was an absolutely game-changing play for sure, because it looked like Aaron Wolf was going to catch it in the end zone at one end with 12 seconds to go, and that was going to make it a 6-point game. And instead, Chad Jorgensen skies Ambrose, and it's a 4-point game. That was the big play that seemed to switch momentum a little bit. But I don't really know what the major adjustment was, and that's what I'm eager to dive into in the days ahead, to try to talk to Bryce and other folks on the Shred to figure out what they changed to change the game, because Seattle was cooking.
I had a chance to go through the film this morning, and I've got to say, I don't know, other than what you said about the Forsberg coverage adjustment onto Foster, I don't know that there was much that they changed. It was just the relentlessness, kind of captained by Chad Jorgensen, that they approached the entire game with. It was what we knew about the Shred coming into this season. They might be a little messy. They might like to yeet it and have some huck turnovers. But at the same time, they're going to be pressuring you with their attack, both offensive and defensively, where you're going to have to be aware and have your head on a swivel in any kind of transition scenario. And I think that just really wore the Cascades down after Seattle sort of jumped out and used up all of their juice early. They just couldn't withstand the amount of runouts and breakouts that the Shred continued well into the second half. And I think you're absolutely right. That moment at the end of the first half when the Seattle had a chance to go up 6, they missed that up line throw to Wolf, and then the Shred score with the buzzer beater to Chad Jorgensen in transition on the other end. I mean, that was it right there.
Absolutely nuts.
Shred come out in the third quarter. They receive the pull. They go down. They score that drive. They're within 4. And from that point forward, they just kind of chunked off a point or two here and there, and then rode again that break train momentum until the Seattle mistakes started to become energy plays on defense. And you saw the Kyle Weinberg layout in the clutch. You saw a little bit more, I think, playmaking in those final few minutes than at the origins of Salt Lake's comeback. And again, I don't know that there were that many adjustments. It was just that the Shred fully realized the identity that they've sort of been championing coming into 2025, which is that we're young, we're inexperienced, we're going to be figuring stuff out. But when we get our legs beneath us, you're going to hate running with us. And I think you saw that with Seattle last night. Seattle was playing their pretty much premium game, and the Shred just outwilled them over 4 quarters.
I remember thinking after the opening 2 Seattle low points, when Raunig absolutely roasted a pair of young Salt Lake cutters deep, I'm thinking to myself, Roning's going to have 15 goals tonight and about 1,000 receiving yards.
You know what? That's been Seattle's game plan in most of these games this year. They get those couple of early Ronig goals. It looks like it's going to be a romp, especially on offense. And then middle part of the game, he kind of goes quiet, and I don't think that's anything reflective of him. I think coverages adapt. I think Seattle kind of goes away from utilizing him, but it is odd how coincidental it is that Seattle gets off to these hot starts where they're just feeding the big dog downfield, and then all of a sudden they hit this arrhythmia in the middle of a game, and they can't find their wide receiver one in Ronig, and it's just. I hear you. I've just been here before with the Cascades team where they get these white
Right.
hot starts. They're feeding Ronig, and then they kind of go away from it. I don't know what happens in kind of the middle parts of these games for the Seattle team right now. Like you say, they're 1-4. They've got to go play Oakland, the division leaders at 4-0 tonight in the Bay, and it looks like their season's
Tough
about ready
draw.
to fall apart.
Yeah,
It's wild. It's a 4-goal difference for the reigning division champions right now between, maybe a 500 record or so and where they currently sit at 1-4.
Yeah, well, I'm on my way to college nationals, and I don't know how closely you're following it, but as of this morning, the four-time reigning champion University of North Carolina women's team was 0-3 in pool play, 3 losses by 3 goals. They lost 3 straight Universe point games, 2 of them which they had the disc on the goal line on Universe. So, like, small margins in the sport of ultimate right now at every level, and these little things can make such a big difference. But yeah, I'd like to see Seattle, and particularly, I'd like to see Zeppelin Ronig try to be a more commanding presence getting the disc underneath. Because, like, he doesn't catch that many unders. And clearly, like, he's shown he can do damage deep. So that's the next part of his game that needs to keep growing. And I think that would do a lot for Seattle's offense because thinking about it, I feel like there's only like, you can count on one or two hands the number of times Ronig caught a good, decent gainer of an under last night. And it just wasn't enough for Seattle as the game went on, and they needed to keep grinding out holds.
Yeah. I mean, Ronig was great. Christian Foster was great. Connor Belfield, he had a couple of banger plays in the open, just sort of crashing into defenders, finishing drives. I really liked his
Yeah,
energy
like
last
Seattle was
night.
impressive.
Yeah.
Overall, Seattle has been impressive, and they're 1-4. And unless they can pull off a miracle today and get the win at Oakland, you know, feels like, as you said, with their season on the line, it's going to be a hard road ahead. But who knows? Who knows?
Flip side,
Wild.
Salt Lake gets their second straight win. They sit at 2-1. Let's move on to the battle in the South. The first ever matchup between San Diego and Carolina. Again, that finishes in sudden death double overtime. The visiting Growlers coming away with the 26-25 win. San Diego improves to 4-1. They'll face 5-0 Atlanta tonight. Carolina dropping to 0-4, position this franchise has never been in since joining the association a decade ago. I just it's hard to ever count out the Flyers. They feel like the most, unless they're sort of 6 feet under and with some wooden stakes in their heart, they're capable of resuscitating and coming back sort of franchises. But this 0-4 hole and their inability to sort of close out games or get a win, it's a problem. We're at Memorial Day and they're winless.
The teams that we think of as, the best in the league have all missed the playoffs once in the last 10 years, except for Carolina. The Flyers have never missed the playoffs
It's a
since they
great
joined
call.
the league in 2015. But like New York missed the playoffs once, DC missed the playoffs once, Atlanta missed the playoffs a couple times in the late 2010s decade. Like the Flyers' consistency has earned the benefit of the doubt from us, which is why, like, even at 0-3, you and I are like, they're okay, they're going to be fine. They're, new coach transition. But again, look, like they didn't play poorly last night against San Diego. They were very close to winning the game. They didn't necessarily play poorly against DC. I think they had 12 turnovers in that game, which is a good number. But they also haven't raised their level and come through in the clutch and shown an incredible ability to, play with force in big moments and to disrupt other teams' smooth offense. Like I feel like you're San Diego's biggest fan, and I'm probably jumping on the bandwagon a little too late. But
Come on board, man. Join the wolf
they're
pack.
I mean, I've always thought they were a well coached team, and I just feel like they now have a little bit more firepower. I was really happy for Stefan Samu, who I've been a fan of for a long time, to get the bookends on Universe Point and Double OT the way he did. But yeah, Khalif played really well. The way the Growlers managed that buzzer beater, and now over the course of everything, I don't even remember if it was the buzzer beater at the end of regulation or the end of the first overtime. I think it was the end of regulation where like they ended up connecting with a wide open guy at the buzzer, open by 25 yards. And you're like, well, how does that happen? We need to see the coach's film of that. But, it looked like the Flyers had him mucked up and they get this throw through the double team across the field. And yeah, I mean, I did not expect San Diego to get a win on this East Coast road trip. Obviously, I was wrong. And the magnitude of that win, remember, this is the only meeting of the season between San Diego and Carolina. So unless the Flyers can really force their way into the playoffs and get another crack at the Growlers there, like San Diego's got the tiebreaker over the Flyers. And at 4-1, San Diego has shown they're not just a team that's going to feast on LA. They can go on the road. And again, I expect Atlanta to take care of business tonight on the second day of the back-to-back and win by 4 or 5 goals. But I think even a 1-1 weekend for the Growlers is an incredible statement weekend for them. And I fully expect them now to be a playoff team in the South Division. I mean, even if they go home at 4-2 with a loss to Atlanta, in my mind, they are a playoff team. And, now a sneaky, really good game, I think it's a couple of weeks from now, is the second day of a back-to-back for the Austin Soul at San Diego. Like, think about the magnitude of that game in the
Oh,
South
yeah.
Division race. Austin has LA the night before, so it's going to be interesting to see how many of these good teams going on the road in these double headers can do something on the second night of a back-to-back. We know that it's, it can be done. We've seen a lot of teams win 2 games in a row. And as I've said before on the pod, there's a big difference between like a 7 o'clock Friday and a 7 o'clock Saturday than like a 7 o'clock Saturday and a 2 p.m. on Sunday. Like so many players have said that there's just a massive difference in the way your body feels getting warmed up for that second game in that situation. But yeah, man, I mean, San Diego, shout out to the Growlers.
How about,
They've been
you
building for
know,
a while and they're looking good.
we heralded so much of the star movement in free agency this offseason. Chicago's gets, Toronto's gets, Atlanta's gets, even Minnesota, San Diego as well. But I think one of the things that we undersold were some of these team returners, these veterans coming back into the fold with, former squads that they may have gone away from for a season or 3 and now are back. How about Marcel Osborne's return for this Growlers team? Last night, 3 assists, 4 goals, 52 of 52 from the field, 572 total yards, not a turnover, 7 hockey assists. We were just talking a moment ago about kind of the missing piece in Seattle's offense, especially since Lofink has been down with injury. I think on the opposite end, you look at a team like San Diego and their addition of Marcel Osborne. I mean, he is such a good connecting fit for what that Growlers attack likes to do. And it just feels like he gets opportunity after open field opportunity with his relentless cutting and his ability to now kind of tween between, a thrower, but from an upfield position as a receiver. Like, he's just so impressive to me. He made a huge layup score last night against the Flyers. And again, it's just kind of one of those trends across the league where maybe we didn't necessarily talk about this player a whole bunch coming into 2025, but man, he is immediately paying dividends for this team kind of at the top of the division that we didn't quite expect this early in the season. As high as I've been on the Growlers, I did not expect them to necessarily go to 4-1 right away. And that
Marcel
one loss being at the to the 5-0 Atlanta Hustle,
Yeah, no, I mean, teammates have long raved about Marcel Osborne. It also
Yeah.
speaks to what the Growlers have built that I thought you were getting ready to make a point about Jesse Cohen. because everything you said about
He's
Osborne,
been great
Jesse
too.
Cohen had what, 9 scores last night? I think 6 goals, 3 assists.
We could sit here and talk about Mac Miller, who's like a Pac-Man on offense with production at this point. I mean, he might lead the league in total yardage in 2025 when it's all said and done. He's just
Yeah.
been everywhere for that team. He's been good in coverage as well in transition. And look, there's still Travis Dunn tossing 7 assists over 500 total yards last night. Anytime they need a big forehand or backhand ripped into a space for a receiver, it just feels like he can dial it up at command. Growlers are clicking right now, man. I mean, I think the only team that does kind of have the confidence to meet them at their peak right now is this Atlanta team that the Growlers are going to be facing tonight.
You know what said something to me about it, I thought it was a good thing, like big picture for San Diego. It's, unless I'm mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but Travis Dunn was not on the field in double overtime on double game point.
I'd have to
And
go back and check, but I think you're
they
correct.
they were on D at the start of the point, and like the fact that they have it. How many times over the past
Yeah,
half decade do we're like, Dunn's phenomenal, but they rely too much on him. Like he's spread
sure.
too thin. He has to do too much. Now he can just be him, and he's got so many other good players around him. And the fact that they're able to get that win over a championship caliber team like Carolina, I know they're 0-4, but there are a lot of guys that have won a lot of big games on that squad, and Fairfax and Mitchell and Bloodworth, and we could go on. Like that says something to me about San Diego's both belief in their depth and the reality of it. That, because I think going into the game, we're like, all right, if San Diego went to double game point, who would be out there? And like, of course, Travis Dunn would be one of the first 3 guys that you named. And I'm not saying they don't need him, obviously, because he's still a really valuable guy. But like, I noticed that after the game, and I'm like, wow, yeah, that's cool that the Growlers have gotten to this point in building this
So you
level
want me to
of
give you
depth
the final lineup
and
for San Diego in double
confidence in
overtime last
their
night? Yeah,
roster.
there's no Travis Dunn. It was Khalif El Salam, Max Hume, KJ Koo, Matt Miller, Marcel Osborne, Stefan Samu, and Will Turner. So yeah, kind of a list of some of those returning vets that maybe haven't been on the team consistently throughout the last 5 years, but have really been outshining and outperforming in 2025. And look, if you want to get specific about the kind of player that they can come to rely on outside of Travis Dunn and who probably took his lineup spot last night in double overtime, how about KJ Koo, man? Fully committed KJ Koo alongside Khalif El Salam for this team, kind of being able to play on both offense and defense when this team needs it. It's a
Yep.
total difference maker for the Growlers in 2025, I think.
What chance do you give him in Atlanta tonight, Adam?
Uh, again, if it was any other team, I think I would take the Growlers and their momentum right now, especially with how the season has gone. You got to kind of ride the hot hand. But the hot hand is also down in the ATL. I mean, the Hustle were doing fireman celebrations up 1 goal last week against their arch nemesis. Like, this team is just feeling itself. And I think for as good as the Growlers played last night, they did have to extend themselves beyond regulation. They are on the road. I know there can be some camaraderie and some, Knights of the Round Table when you get galvanized in those kind of spaces. But I just think the absolute wall that they're going to run into at Atlanta is just going to be a little too much. Now, again, I could be wrong. I've been shown that throughout 2025, right? Like, these predictions are about as, are worth about as much as the napkins that they're written on. But, I
Speaking
think
of
that
you
the
being
Growlers,
wrong, didn't you say that my hunch that New York was going to get the win was way off?
I don't think that was me. I did not say that. No, if anything, we can talk about the East Division game. Do you want to jump over?
Yeah. Last point about the Flyers, and I'm just giving you a hard time.
Sure. I
They're not
still
eliminated. The Flyers are not eliminated, but man, they got no margin for error because, let's be honest. The Soul have 4 likely wins against Houston. San Diego has 4 likely wins against LA. Maybe Carolina gets 1 or 2 at home against Atlanta, but they're certainly not big favorites in those games if they're favorites at all. And right now, I'd say they're probably home dogs against the Hustle. And Carolina also has to go to Philly and Pittsburgh. So, like, there's a roadmap for Carolina, but, like, they're not going to make the playoffs at 6-6 in this division right now with what we've seen from Austin and San Diego. So, like, 8-4 might not even be good enough, but they're going to need to go 7-5, 8-4 likely to have a chance. And yeah, it's must win time for Carolina. Otherwise, they're going to be sitting out of the playoffs for the first time in franchise history.
That's wild. That's wild. And speaking of another, franchise that's been in virtually every postseason over the last decade, we can now, I think, jump over to the East Division debacle between the Empire and the Phoenix last night. Empire persevering 17-16, despite a little bit of contentiousness at the end with some calls. I thought the Empire defense played its best game of the season. They did a really good job of keeping that Philly attack in front of them. Obviously, the Phoenix still did their kind of whirling three-man game in the red zone with Sam Grossberg, Scott Heyman, and Sean Mott to good effect. But New York was able to, I think, put a cap on some of the fast breaks that Philly likes to run. And then on the flip side, I mean, when New York just kind of leans back and goes on this two-man game of Calvin Brown and John Randolph, and they just get a feed downfield to Ben Yacht and whoever gets open at their convenience, it's a hard New York tack to dispossess, right? Like, I think that's what the Philly defense learned last night. The Phoenix have been playing great through this first, quarter of the season, but they just kind of ran into an immovable object with, again, Brown and John Randolph just going back and forth all game long.
Yeah, not one of the big names at the moment on New York, but shout out Sam Jonas. I think he finished with three
Game
blocks,
changer.
including the most important block of the game on a deep shot. I think when the game was tied, maybe even Philly was up by 1 with the disc. It all kind of runs together at this point, and I'm in the car, so I can't look it up. But Jonas's block on Hannah in the deep space, an absolute game-changing play. And, he's the type of guy that the Empire need to be the next generation of Mike and Ryan Drost. And speaking of the Drost, it was cool to see Ryan back on the field. It was weird seeing him in, I think, Connor Russell's number 52 that he was suited up in. Like, since when have we not seen a Drost in a 16 or an 80? That was a little strange. But, yeah, it was a must-win for New York at that stage of the season. And, obviously Antoine Davis, his return being healthy was important too. And, he gets the block at the buzzer. He made a handful of plays. Ben Yacht's leading the league in goals. I don't know if we've spent enough time talking about Yacht, who continues to look really good physically. He's changed his game. Like, I wonder how many times Ben Yacht has thrown downfield this year, because, that was something he did regularly when he was the MVP of the league. And, he turned sometimes his completion rate was around 89, 90, 91. But, like, he's being way careful with the disc, which makes him a little less dynamic. And sometimes I feel like, the Ben Yacht from 3-4 years ago would have taken a shot that he didn't take. But, the game has changed, too, in the last 3-4 years. Like, possession is certainly more at a premium now, and he's shifted with that. So I just wanted to mention Yacht because I think he's playing really well. And yeah, like, this is not. I think Philly still comes out of this game still. They got to feel pretty good about
absolutely.
their start to the season and what they've got. But there was a real opportunity to put the nail in New York's coffin, in a manner of speaking, last night. And, there are a lot of tough games ahead for both these teams in an East Division race that just seems to be really, really contentious 1-6. Every East Division game right now feels kind of must-watchy to me.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a single game. There's no Vegas, with all due respect, where you're like, oh, you kind of pencil in a win. There's just not any of those. Every single game is going to be a fight.
Yeah. And kind of working backwards through your points, I think it was the first time we saw in 2025 the Phoenix not take advantage of an opportunity presented to them. I think that was what
Right.
really qualified their first three victories of the season, was their ability to, to their coach's own credit, sort of seize the moment, in his own words. I think that was the real strength of this team. They always seem to be able to put themselves in this situation where they were playing to their strengths. Last night against New York, it just kind of felt like they were in between a rock and a hard place consistently throughout the game. New York was not going to turn it over much on offense. To your points about Ben Yacht, there's a little less pop in his game, but my God, the intelligence of that dude on the field, he just makes it look so easy to pick up goals, right? I mean, it's just handfuls at a time right now. It's just kid in a candy shop for him, finishing these drives through New York. Again, he just gets to kind of be hands off. He's not as much of a dynamic sort of hybrid in the continuation game, to your points, but why does he need to be when there's JR and Calvin Brown or Solomon Rushmeyer-Bailey or Jack Williams coming back into the fold, just working the disc? And your point about Antoine Davis, I mean, when he's out there beating his chest, swatting down passes, getting open on the front cone with that top speed,
It's a swagger New York needs.
Yes, exactly. And it was the thing that was so lacking in their first couple of games this year, was that there was no teeth to this defense. There was no, we're going to run roughshod over you not only in this point, but the next one and the next four after that. I mean, that was always the terror of the Empire when they were in their dynasty mode, was that it wasn't just going to be one or two breaks. They were going to completely upend the game. And in a 5-minute stretch, you'd go from, it's 11-8 to now it's 19-9, Like, that's what the New York and the championship teams of yore used to do to you. And now it's like they still have that pressure, but there isn't that tenacity that follows, the opportunism. And I think that last night you saw a little bit more of that with Twan just getting in there and, again, doing that big shouty energy and knowing who's the man on the field, kind of take charge element that I think this Empire defense has been known for the better part of a decade at this point.
Yeah.
And
New York's also owned
season.
end of quarters, Adam. Sorry to interrupt, but they've owned end of quarters throughout their best ultimate. And like, think about the Yacht buzzer beater off the deflection, and like kind of how he read that possibility and ended up being like a wide open clep catch off the deflection from the pile. Like that type of anticipation is just kind of Yacht in a nutshell. Like, he can go up and win it with a jump ball, or he can clean up the trash. And, in a one-goal game, there are dozens of little moments that you can look back on and think, without that, would they have pulled it off? We talked about it earlier with Seattle and Salt Lake.
And that end of quarter scenario is just becoming such an important factor in this season. Again, we constantly harp on this, small margins of victory, just little here and there plays making all the difference. How about these end of quarter situations? I mean, we've brought it up continually in our recapping of last night. That you go to the Salt Lake game, the absolute turnaround at the end of the first half. You look at this New York game and the presence of Antoine Davis and what he provides is that canopy over the top and just not allowing you to even have the hope of a Hail Mary. It's just throughout the course of this 2025 campaign, we see again and again, if you're not handling these buzzer beater moments, you're going to be losing games, and you cannot be affording those little moments when everyone is in contention. Again, it feels like we've still got 10 plus teams that could consider themselves a championship possibility in 2025. It's nuts. We're heading towards June. Usually by now we have about 5 to 6 teams that we could confidently say, yeah, they might win it this year. Right now, I mean, look, what if the Flyers just decide to win the last 8 games on their schedule? They could do it. Would we consider them to be the hot team going into the playoffs like we did in 2021? It's just still anyone's game, and it gets back to, it just comes down to who's winning it at the buzzer, who's being aware enough to really pay attention in these situational elements.
And obviously, the game of the night was not Oregon-Vegas, but I had it on my iPad as we called the Salt Lake-Seattle game in the booth, and I saw the stats at the end. Vegas finished the game, if the stats are accurate, with 2 more breaks than Oregon did. How did the Steel win? They scored the last goal in all 4 quarters. So you add up those mini breaks, and that's how Oregon's 2-2. And as you said, in third place in the West Division. instead of being 1-3, and that was the difference between Vegas getting its first win or perhaps that game going to overtime. So yeah, like buzzer beaters, but also just who can score the last goal of a quarter is a mini break. And I mean, we saw this. I think it was a Chicago Madison game last year or 2 years ago, where like Madison had more breaks than Chicago, but Chicago won because of the end of quarter goofiness for the Radicals. So this doesn't happen very often, but usually they even out over time too. But if you can win all four end of quarters, it gives you breathing room in ways you can be outplayed and still find a way. So, yeah. Do you give Oregon a shot at Colorado today?
I don't know. I mean, what was it, 28-14 the last time they played? 24-14, something like that in the Summit Home
Yeah.
opener. I think Colorado's going to use this as a little bit of a get-right game after their tough 0-2 road trip. Again, another team that I think we kind of have put to the back of our minds given their most recent results, but Colorado is still set to get some of the best collegiate talent after Nationals wraps up this weekend. I know that's where your mind's going to be as soon as we wrap up here. It's just... We're not even fully 5 weeks into this season. We have a slate of teams that are about, a quarter to a half through their schedule, but we're about to get a new injection of talent across the entire league that I think is going to upend our expectations once again. It feels like you ask about Oregon and Colorado. I still think Summit, but given the trends of the season, why not go to double overtime between the Steel and the Summit? Why not?
I mean, that just speaks to the uncertainty and unpredictability of every single game. In years past, we'd look at the rosters that Oregon and Colorado have had and the teams that they have and just think, yeah, we'd pencil in the Summit victory. And to some extent, I still think we're doing that. And yet, our antenna are up for insanity because this season has wreaked plenty of insanity and plenty of unpredictable, exhilarating results. And yeah, it's so much fun to be a part of. I said it on the air at the end of the show last night that through the first 4 weeks of the season there had been 7 1-goal games, and then we had 4 more 1-goal games on Friday night in week 5. So you add it all up, like more than one in every 4 games so far has been decided by one. And there are a bunch of other great games that have been 2, 3, 4, 5-goal games. So
wasn't there
yeah,
not an overtime game in the first 3 weeks, and now we've had
right.
4 in the last 10 days, 8 days?
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, and we may not be done.
We may not be done.
I got Detroit Indy going to overtime tonight.
Okay. Well, yeah, for those who have made it this far in the podcast, you're still going to want to tune in tonight on Watch UFA TV. There's still a full slate of action. Detroit at Indy, as Evan mentioned, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Seattle, still clawing their way on the road at Oakland. 4-0 Spiders looking to kind of vanquish last year's West Division champions. And then in the game of the week at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, again on Watch UFA TV, 4-1 San Diego at 5-0 Atlanta. You'll probably be busy calling collegiate games. I'm super excited for this game of the week matchup between the Growlers and the Hustle.
Yeah.
And
Before
then,
we go, Adam, I just want to call
yeah.
it right. I want to call it right now. Max Gibson at the buzzer. San Diego wins in Atlanta tonight.
You think
Mark
a total
it down.
reversal of that
Yeah,
Temple
why
of
not?
Doom moment he had to go through against Dean Ramsey? How about
Why
Dean
not?
Ramsey in the
A
air
little
this
redemption.
year? Who wins in a 1-versus-1 in jump ball scenarios between Dean Ramsey and Brett Holzmeyer right now?
I mean, I thought you were
Yeah,
going to
you
say
gotta
like.
pause. You gotta pause. I still think I'm taking Big Brett, but like,
I mean,
Mean Dean has been something. He's been feasting on those jump balls.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say, Dean Ramsey or Chet Holmgren at the buzzer, who wins? Like let's
Dean
go even
Ramsey.
bigger.
Dean Ramsey, all day, all day.
Yeah, I just think like, I don't know what a story it would be if San Diego could sweep this road trip. It's going to be really hard, but
I kind of like them. I think they have the attitude to do it. One of my favorite things about this season is that there's an edge of hubris to almost all of these teams, where they all kind of got the bit in their chomp, and they're just like, yeah, you know what? Let's go 2-0 on this road trip. Let's absolutely just turn these tables. And I feel like the Growlers, given just, again, their sort of level of swagger and the level that they're playing at, they could do it. They could do it. I'm not taking them tonight, though. I'm taking a Hustle at home to go to 6-0.
Gibson at the buzzer. Let's go.
All right. I'll do it for this episode of Swing Pass. Evan and I will be back with you in short time, but be sure to tune in for all of the Frisbee action, both in college and at pros throughout the Memorial holiday weekend. We'll tune in alongside you. Bye for now. Frisbee forever.